Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the 8th Annual Wild Wisconsin Winter Web Conference. I'm Jamie Machek with the Wisconsin Valley Library Service, and I am moderating the Technology Trends track today. We have 3 sessions. This is our first of 3. Assisting me is Jean Anderson with the South Central Library System. So thank you, Jean, and we're glad to have all of you here. Our presenter for this session is Leah Gentry, and Leah works for the Menominee Falls Public Library here in Wisconsin, and she's going to be talking about cutting the cable cord. So Leah, whenever you're ready, please begin. Leah, I don't think we're hearing you.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now. Thank you.
Yep. Perfect. Yeah. So hi everyone. My name is Leah. So today I'm going to be going over how to help your patrons cut the cable cord. So this will be a little bit of a hybrid presentation. This is something that I teach to my patrons here at the library. So I'm going to be going over what I teach them and offering you some tips on teaching this for yourself if you're interested at your library. So to start with, a lot of my patrons are going to be really new to cutting the cable cord, and this is all sort of a little foreign to them. So I start with what is cutting the cable cord. So it's when a person is no longer best served by traditional cable or satellite services, and they choose to cancel their subscription. So why would a person want to move away from cable? The number one thing that I hear is money. So unfortunately, cable companies don't work the way that something like car insurance does, where the longer you're with the company, you build that loyalty and your rates start going down. With cable, it's the exact opposite. They just keep raising it every year, and you have to call and argue with them to try and get it lowered. And I think people are just getting sick of that. Another thing I hear a lot is they want to eliminate the extra channels that just aren't being watched. So often people are paying, perhaps hundreds of dollars for hundreds of channels. And when you really stop and think about the channels you're watching, it's maybe 10 or 20 of them on a regular basis. So you start wondering what you're really paying for. And I always like to remind my patrons at the start of the class that every person's situation is going to be unique. So they might sit through this entire class and at the end say, well, actually, cable is still my best option. And that's totally fine. I don't hate cable. I don't work for Netflix. So I just let them know that they might be more comfortable staying with cable, and that's okay. So I wanted to go over some of the details of the class or the logistics of it. So why did I decide to offer this class to our patrons? I cut the cord myself about 7 years ago, and I did a lot of research to make that happen. So I decided that all of that research would probably help other people as well. So I first offered the class in 2016, and the first class had over 20 attendees with a wait list. So I realized that I had probably tapped into something that was an important issue for people, and then I've been offering it ever since then. So at this point, I've been offering the class twice a year, once in the spring and then again in the fall, and I do 2 sessions each time, and I space them out. I do one in the morning and one in the evening. In the past fall, I was quite filled with my classes, so I am probably going to add a 3rd session coming up in spring. I do limit the attendance to 25 patrons, and I encourage registration. If I have a few walk-ins over 25, that's okay. I have noticed that more than 25, it tends to maybe get a little unruly. People kind of start talking amongst themselves, or they start kind of shouting out questions. So 25 seems to be a little bit of a sweet spot with that. And the attendees, they're usually, a lot of them are around retirement age. Again, this is kind of a new topic for them. And ideas like streaming TV are completely new. I do get, though, some patrons sort of in that elusive 30 to 40 age range. So there is a potential for broad appeal with a class like this. So this is a sample of the poster that we use for marketing. This is really great because we just change out the dates and times there in the middle every time I'm going to teach the class, and it gets people's attention. So I do open the registration about a month before, and it usually does fill up pretty quickly then. So what exactly does the class cover? So at this point, I'm going to jump into sort of a scaled down version of what I actually present to my patrons. So you can feel free to use any of these ideas to develop your own class. My slides will be available on the Wild Wisconsin website, so you can go and grab them there as well to get you started. As a caveat, I do update this class every single time I teach it because things change so much with cutting the cable cord. So if you do use my information, just make sure that you look through it and give it an update before you present it. So I do like to start with some basic internet information because this could affect people's decisions on if they decide to cut the cord or not. A good internet connection is going to be vital for most of these cable alternatives. And depending on location, some of my patrons may not have strong internet connections in their homes. And if that's the case, streaming would be very frustrating for them. If the video would buffer a lot, or it might cut off completely. So it would just be something that wouldn't be a viable option for them, and they may want to stick with cable. I also get a lot of questions about internet speed basics, like Mbps. They see that a lot, maybe on their internet bills or in advertisements for internet. So that does stand for megabits per second. And another question is usually, how much of that do I need? To give them an idea, 5 megabits per second is what's recommended for one basic stream of Netflix. So a lot of times you'll see some internet companies advertising, 100 megabits per second for so much money. When if you don't have a very large family that's streaming a lot, you may not need that, and you could perhaps go with a lower plan if they have tiered pricing. So I also like to offer information on internet providers because since they do vary based on location. And there's a website there, internetprovidersbyzip.com. It sounds like a fake website, but it is real. They can go in there and put their zip code in, and it will show them providers in their area. And a lot of times there may be providers that people don't even know exist. So that can be a good resource for that. So I do like to go over with my patrons some of my experience just so they know where I'm coming from and what things helped me when I started this process. So again, it was about 7 years ago that I sort of realized that I was mostly just watching Netflix or DVDs that I was getting from the library. Obviously, working in the library, I have a bit of an advantage there as the DVDs are readily accessible. But I just realized I really wasn't watching my cable a lot. So I decided to make a list of the TV programs that I really wanted to continue watching for whatever reason. And then I needed to decide what services would offer me that content. So services are things like Netflix and Hulu. And then what devices would I use to access that content? So how am I going to get this on my TV, basically? And then I did a lot of research. So I spent probably a month or two doing this research, and I encourage my patrons to do the same. A lot of them are really nervous about making this move because they've had cable for years and years, maybe decades. So it's a big change for them. Next, I compared my costs. So with streaming, to move to that completely, I needed a Roku streaming box, which was what helped me get these things onto my TV. And that was a one-time cost of $100. So the Roku does have several cheaper options out there. I personally decided to go with the more expensive one at that time because I was nervous about it. And I thought, well, if I get the best one, then I won't have any problems. And so I've had that box for 7 years and I haven't had any issues with it. So it was a pretty good investment at the time. I also added a TV antenna, and that was a one-time cost of $30. And then I subscribed to 2 streaming services, Netflix and Hulu, which was about $16 total per month. Those prices have gone up a little bit for those, but it's still in that same range. And at that time, I was paying $60 a month for cable. So my savings came out to $44 a month. And within 3 months, those savings had paid for that one-time cost of the Roku and the antenna. So after 3 months, I was just saving $44. And I really didn't miss cable and didn't feel like I wanted to go back ever. So what should my patrons consider when they think about doing this? I recommend pretty much that they follow the same track that I did. Start with making a list of the networks and the shows that you absolutely want to watch. So networks is important because I hear from a lot of people that they like just sort of having a certain channel on in the background while they go about their day or their weekends. Usually this channel is something like HGTV or the Hallmark Channel or maybe a news channel. And so they're afraid that if they cut the cable, that's something that they're going to lose. And that's definitely not the case. There are services out there that can provide that. So then you want to look at the services that are going to provide that. So again, if you're looking for something like, having HGTV in the background all day, Netflix wouldn't be the one for you. But another option like Sling TV might work out. And I do like to remind people that many networks offer their shows for free on their websites. So networks like ABC and NBC, you can go straight to their websites and watch shows for free. They do have ads, but you would be watching ads if you're watching regular TV anyway. I also do recommend that my patrons consider adding an antenna to their TV. So depending on their location, they can get dozens of free channels with an antenna. There, a lot of times patrons tend to think of antennas as sort of the old rabbit ears up on the roof, which isn't really the case anymore. The modern antennas plug right into the back of your TV. They're about the size of a mouse pad, and they really don't, so they don't take up much space. They're not too difficult to work, and they work really great. And I do recommend too, if they're concerned about an antenna, they could try buying one and giving it a go. And if it doesn't work, they could return it. I do provide another website called tvfool.com that can show someone's proximity to a tower and the channels they could possibly pick up if they attach an antenna to their TV. So it's really nice. During the class, I'll often go to this website and type in the library's address, and it will show, if we had an antenna here at the library, what channels we could pick up. And then I'd like to talk a little bit about OTA DVRs. So OTA stands for over the air, and DVR is digital video recorder. So a lot of times I have patrons that are concerned about giving up their cable or their satellite because they will lose their DVR. So the DVR is what allows them to record shows when they're not home or pause shows. So they're just worried about missing out on that. They do have these devices that you can get that work with antennas and will record for you. They are a little expensive. They start at around $100. However, I think to rent a DVR from Spectrum is around $20 a month at this point. So after 5 months, you are saving money then. So next I'm going to jump into talking about those specific streaming services like Netflix or Sling TV. Before I do that, I just wanted to see if anybody has any questions on sort of the internet basics or the antennas or anything like that, because I usually have questions around this point during my class.
Hi, Leah.
Yeah.
This is Jean. Jamie stepped out for just a second.
Sure.
So I don't see any coming in yet, but I just wanted to let people know, go ahead and use your questions panel anytime during the webinar, and we will pass those along when Leah takes a break for questions. Oh, the one just came in. Where do you get an antenna?
So Best Buy is a real good one. And otherwise, just Amazon or anywhere online will have them as well.
Okay. And then another question is, do the old antennas on top of houses do anything for current channels?
Um, I would say that would depend. You could go ahead and try it and see. I know they switched over to the digital channels quite a few years ago,
Mhm.
so that might be dicey trying to use an old one.
Okay. Um, and then do you need a powered antenna to get more channels?
No.
No. Okay. And then is there any particular brand of antenna or just whatever? I think when we went to antenna, I tried like 2 or 3 different kinds before I found one that worked.
Yeah.
It wasn't a
Yeah.
particular brand, but
Yeah, I don't know if there's any reviews out there for particular brands. You could certainly search for that. I think I tried two before I found one that I liked. So
okay.
I think their Best Buy in particular is probably used to people kind of returning and trying a different one.
Okay. Excuse me. Uh, pardon me 1 second. So another question is, how would you recommend people evaluate if their TV is up to speed for these technologies?
Um, Trying it out, honestly. So we're going to talk about TVs in a little bit and
Okay.
talk about streaming TVs, like streaming on TVs. But I just recommend testing things out and seeing what happens before you start buying new stuff.
Excellent. Thank you. That's all the
Sure.
questions so far.
Okay, great. So I think we'll go ahead and move into streaming services. So again, go ahead and just keep entering your questions if you have any as we go along. So how does streaming work? Again, a lot of my patrons are pretty new to this world, so they don't even really understand what streaming is. It might be a new word to them. So it's basically when you're accessing things like TV shows and movies through an internet connection instead of through a cable cord. And I like to just sort of summarize some things that most streaming services you'll encounter using most of them. Most of them will include commercials. Netflix doesn't, but I'm pretty sure most of the other ones do. With most of these, you will pay per month, and there's going to be no contract. So that's the big change from cable and satellite is there's a lot more freedom with this. I know a lot of people that will sign up for Netflix for a month or two and watch all the shows that they want to watch on there and then cancel and then pick it up again later. And that's perfectly fine. That's kind of how it's meant to work actually. And or if let's say you travel a lot or you're just not at home a lot in the summer, you don't have to, subscribe to any of these, and then you could pick them up again in the winter. So it's just that nice freedom. And many of these also offer free trials. So you could try them out for a week or two. And if it's just really not working for you, you didn't even pay anything. Often the cost for these will depend on the number of screens or devices that you're using at the same time. So when you're considering switching over to something, you also want to consider the size of your household. So if you have, maybe 4 or 6 people that are going to be streaming different things at the same time, that will increase that cost a little bit for these services. And many of these offer content that you can't watch anywhere else. So I know Netflix, Hulu, and Amazon Prime all have special TV shows that you can't watch them anywhere else. And often you can't even get them on DVD or Blu-ray until, maybe a year or two later, if ever. So there are two main types of streaming services. The first one is on-demand streaming. So this is where you basically choose from a catalog of movies, previously aired TV shows, or original content. And you just click to start, and you can watch it, and you can pause it, and you can stop whenever you want, and you can switch between things quite easily. So this is like what Netflix does. And then the newer option is live TV streaming. So live TV streaming just came around in the last few years, and this was a lot of people's reasons why they didn't want to move away from cable and satellite, because live TV streaming really wasn't an option for a long time. It's really great for sports fans in particular, or people that like watching news as it unfolds, or award shows with election coverage coming up. It's great for that. So this is for the type of person or the type of viewer who wants to see things as they're happening. So next I'm going to talk about some of the specific services, the big ones that are out there. So I like to start with Netflix, and just so you're all aware, the logos at the top of these are hyperlinks. And usually when I'm teaching the class, I'll go ahead and click on the links and go to the websites for these services, just so my patrons can get familiar with what they're going to see when they go to the websites themselves, and they can see exactly what the pricing plans look like and the channels available, and just so it kind of demystifies it a little bit for them. So a 2017 study showed that 54% of homes in the US had Netflix at that point. I have a feeling that number probably held steady or has increased since then. Netflix is really it was really the major catalyst for this whole cable cord cutting movement, and it was a lot of people's first experience with streaming and considering giving up cable. So I like to just talk about it first because it is one of the biggies. So Netflix offers popular movies, TV shows, and other programming like documentaries and stand-up comedy. I do like to warn people that the TV shows are usually a season behind. So for example, something like Grey's Anatomy, which has been on for, I think they're in their 15th season, you won't be able to watch the most recent episode of that on Netflix. However, you could go back and watch seasons 1 through 14. So they do have tons of content and back catalogs of things, but they just won't have that most recent episode. There are other services that would provide that for you, which is why a lot of people actually end up subscribing to multiple services. And the pricing starts at $9, with their most expensive plan being around $16. So again, that $16 plan is for more streaming services at once. So 6 people could be streaming at one time different things for $16. So again, whatever plan you sign up for probably really is going to depend on your household size. So moving on to Hulu. They offer a collection of movies and major network TV shows like ABC and NBC, often available 24 hours after they air. So this is where you could go ahead and watch that most recent episode of Grey's Anatomy. If it aired last night at 7 p.m., it'll be available at 7 p.m. tonight to watch. And the pricing starts at $6, and that does include ads, or you can choose to pay $12 and you won't have any ads then. And the way that Hulu is a little different than Netflix is that they do offer a live TV option as well. So those plans start at $55 with ads and $61 with no ads. So at this point in my class, people kind of start grumbling or talking amongst themselves. I think that price point sort of startles them for the live TV. Live TV is expensive. It usually averages right around that $40 to $50 range. But a lot of times, if you take a look at what you're currently paying for cable, it's still cheaper, and you might even be getting more with these live TV streaming options. So I always warn people, don't get too scared off by that price. It might still end up being worth it. I do like to mention Amazon Prime Video just because I think many of my patrons may already be Prime members. I'll usually ask them in the class how many of them are, and it's about a third to a half, something like that. And they may not even realize that with that membership, not only do they get the free the free 2-day shipping, but they also get access to anything that's marked as a Prime Video in Amazon. So to be a Prime member is $119 a year. And I let them know to just go ahead and look for that blue Prime symbol on videos. And if they are a Prime member, that means that they can watch those videos and TV shows for free. So Sling TV is a little bit newer than some of these other ones, and they were really one of the first ones to offer live TV options. So they've sort of made a name for themselves and built a base, an audience base around being the first one to offer that. So their plans are a little cheaper than Hulu Live. They start at $25 a month for either the orange or the blue plan, and it's $40 a month for those two combined. So you get a little bit of a deal. And at this point, I usually would go over to sling.com and show my patrons exactly what they would get for each plan, the orange and the blue plan. And they find that really helpful to see what networks are actually going to be included with those plans, and if the networks that are important to them are listed there. And with Sling, you can add a cloud DVR for $5 a month. So the word cloud kind of has some mystique behind it as well for a lot of my patrons. Basically, what this means is there's not going to be a piece of equipment in your home that you're recording onto, like with a traditional DVR. Instead, you're going to be recording to Sling's server, and whenever you want to access that, you can go ahead and do so. So some other newer streaming options are Disney Plus, which just started in November. It is currently $7 a month or $70 a year. And a lot of people don't know that Disney includes lots of things like all the Disney movies, all the Marvel movies, and there'll be new TV shows for that, all the Star Wars movies and TV shows, National Geographic, and new content that they're making. And Apple TV Plus is another new one that just rolled out in November. So that's only $5 a month, but it has significantly less content. They currently have 12 original TV shows and 1 documentary movie, and they've been adding content monthly. So if there is a show that you're interested in, because they do have some pretty big names attached to a lot of their shows, you could sign up for $5 a month and watch, you know, all the shows that you want and then cancel it until they add some more that you're interested in. So a couple of other big ones that have made a name for themselves recently is Philo TV or Philo, I'm not quite sure on that yet. It's $20 a month, and it is live TV. And the way that they get away with being so cheap at only $20 a month is it doesn't include any news or sports or local programs. So the news and the sports are really where, you know, they have to make contracts with those companies, and that can hike the prices up, and then, you know, these companies have to pass that on to the consumer. But since Philo didn't do that, they can keep their price pretty cheap at $20. And it does include 58 really popular channels like HGTV, Hallmark, and TV Land. So I've had a lot of my patrons that have been very interested in this option. Another biggie that has come out recently is YouTube TV at $50 a month. So this is live TV, and it includes all the major channels with sports and news. So again, it's still cheaper than Hulu Live, and includes everything that you would probably want. And they have unlimited DVR storage for no extra cost, which is really nice. And right now, YouTube TV is actually the top recommendation for live TV. So all the reviews have taken a look at, you know, pricing and the channels available and the quality of the connection and the ease of use, and have rated YouTube TV as the #1 right now. So these are a bunch of other streaming options that are out there. So sometimes in my class, I'll go through each one of these if there's interest. I just wanted to include these here, where if you are looking to create your own class, you could go ahead and include some information on these if you think your patrons would be interested in them. So next we are going to talk about streaming devices. So basically, how do I get this stuff onto my TV? But I do want to pause here for any questions about any of the services we just talked about.
Hi, this is Jamie, and I think, well, there is a question from Nicole. Does YouTube TV include their music?
I don't believe so. I think it's a separate entity.
Okay. All right, I think that's all we have for now. Thank you.
Okay, great. Okay, so now that we know about all these services, how do you get them onto your TV and actually watch them? Most people don't want to be watching on their smartphone, or even their tablet might be too small for them. So I do like to start with letting people know that if they already own a smart TV, you can usually access these services through those TV menus. So I know my TV, the remote actually had a Netflix button on it. So I could just hit that button and it would go ahead and connect. So you do need to make sure that the smart TV is connected to the internet. And then once it is, you should look in the menus and see if you have options to add what's called apps. So it would be the Netflix app or the Hulu app. And if you do, then you wouldn't need anything else to get that onto your TV. You wouldn't need to buy any devices or anything like a Roku or anything like that. I will say that some of the older smart TVs, sort of the first generation of them, I just don't think the technology was quite there yet to keep that steady connection for streaming. I don't think they realized how people were going to be using it in the future so much. So if you do try this on your smart TV and it maybe is just a little bit older and you're, buffering the video a lot or you keep dropping the connection, it's probably not Netflix or Hulu that's the problem. And it's probably not even your internet that's the problem. It could be that the smart TV just isn't keeping that connection. And then you may end up having to buy a separate device for that. But go ahead and try it out, see what happens and see if you can save yourself a little money with that. So many of these devices that we're going to talk about do connect to your TV through an HDMI port. So a lot of TVs made in the last 10 years are going to have at least one of these ports on the back of it. If your TV doesn't have one, you can get an HDMI adapter. I think they're less than $10. So there's a nice workaround for that. So next I'm going to talk about the types of streaming devices. So again, this is something that you may have to purchase if you don't have a smart TV. So there's a couple of main types. First, there's the streaming sticks. So those are about the size of a USB drive, and those plug right into the HDMI port on your TV, and then they connect to your home's Wi-Fi, and that's how they pull in the signal so that you can watch things like Netflix. So these are a little less expensive than some of the other options and just a little bit less powerful. However, I know people that use these streaming sticks and they don't have any problems with them. The next option is set-top boxes. So these are a little larger and a little more expensive, but they do have a little more power behind them as a result. They just tend to have a little bit of a better connection and keep that connection. And they can connect with Wi-Fi or Ethernet. And when I say they're a little larger, they still fit in the palm of your hand. So they're really not that big. They won't take up much space sort of in your home. And then multi-functioning systems is another option to use. So this is something like a Blu-ray player or a gaming system like a PlayStation or an Xbox. So these types of systems connect to the internet already in your home usually, and you can see if you can add apps like a Netflix app to it and then run it off of that. Again, I've had experience with trying to run Netflix on a Blu-ray player, and it is a very spotty connection. So if you're having issues with like maybe an older Blu-ray player and you're trying to do this, it might be it's just not well equipped enough to handle it, and then you would have to perhaps purchase something else. And I do believe Hulu has just stopped supporting or making the app for Blu-ray players, so that wouldn't be an option for Hulu. So I want to talk about the sort of two biggest of the specific streaming devices. So Roku is one of the big ones, and it offers both streaming sticks and set-top boxes. And the price range there is $30 to $100. So if you remember when I had cut the cable cord, I had purchased the $100 set-top box, and I've had a great experience with it. So it's really nice. It does easily allow you to navigate between services. So the image you'll see there on your screen is what basically my TV looks familiar to that when I turn it on. I take my Roku remote that came with the box and I just arrow over to whichever app I want to launch. So if I want to go into Hulu and watch, last week's episode of Grey's Anatomy, I can go ahead and do that. And if halfway through I decide, oh, you know what, I actually want to watch this movie on Netflix, I can stop Grey's Anatomy and just hop right over to Netflix and automatically play a movie over there. So it's just, it brings everything together really nice in a cohesive way. Another really big one that a lot of my patrons already have or have considered adding is the Amazon Fire TV or their Fire Stick. So their streaming stick is called the Fire Stick, or they have the Fire TV box. And those prices range from $40 to $120. So it is just a little more expensive than the Roku. The nice thing about that is you can now get an Alexa one. So if you have an Alexa in your home, they can pair together nice, and you can say, you know, you come home and say, Alexa, play Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, and it'll start playing on your TV. So it's pretty cool. And there's lots of other boxes and devices out there that people can use, but these are the two biggest and the two that get reviewed the most and updated the most. So these are the two that I do like to recommend that sort of newbies start out with. So I like to go over the future of streaming. Some of my patrons question if this is just a fad or something that, you know, in a couple of years people will be just signing back up for cable because there'll be so many streaming options that they'll be paying more for streaming than cable. I don't think that will happen. Many of these cable and satellite providers and the networks themselves are realizing that this is the way that things are heading. Streaming is how people are going to be watching TV in the future. In fact, Netflix led the Oscar nominations this year for movies like The Irishman and The Marriage Story. So this is really sort of changing the industry and changing Hollywood and changing the way that a lot of things are made now. So to try and counter this, some cable companies are developing what they call skinny bundles, which basically offer some basic channels to stream for a reduced cost. So Spectrum has one called Spectrum TV Choice, which is $25 a month. They are being very sort of cloak and dagger about this offering. I've been told that there's nothing on their website about it, and you have to call and specifically ask for this plan. So it offers local channels, plus you get a choice of 10 cable channels. So some of my patrons that have done this, I've heard very mixed reviews. Some of them like it and they think it's a really good deal, and others have told me that it was a good deal until a year went by and then the price went up. So it does seem like they're still kind of up to their old tricks in that regard, but it might be a good option to try for a year. I also like to give my patrons some resources since this is an always changing world. It's good to stay informed with this information. So some websites. techhive.com is a wonderful technology website that I use on a regular basis, and they really do have some great articles on cutting the cable cord. One of their writers actually puts out a weekly newsletter that basically every week he goes through the whole world of cable cord cutting and sums up everything into a weekly newsletter that he sends out every Friday morning. So this has been really helpful for me with teaching this class. I basically save all of those newsletters, and when it comes time to update my class, I'll just go through all of those and see, okay, what's changed in the last 4 or 5 months. So I would recommend, if you have any interest in teaching a class like this, that you go ahead and sign up for that newsletter. There is also a website dedicated to this called cordcuttersnews.com, and they have a lot of great information on there. And then I like to recommend justwatch.com. It's a little bit of a different one. It's not so much information on cord cutting, but more a resource for those who have cut the cord. I usually actually will demo this in my class. Basically, you can go to this website, and if there is a TV show or a movie that you're interested in watching, you can type it in and it will tell you what streaming services have it. So this is great for people who subscribe to multiple services, like maybe they are on Netflix and Hulu and Amazon Prime, and they want to watch a specific movie. Well, instead of having to go to each service and search for that movie, they can go to justwatch.com and it will tell them where they could watch it. And then, of course, I always like to plug the library at the end. You know, it amazes me how many patrons still don't know that we do have tons of DVDs and Blu-rays, and we have TV shows and new movies. I like to remind them that, you know, if they can't find it here, we can usually get it at another library or we'll purchase it. So this is a really good opportunity to plug that a little bit. So this is a basic intro to what can seem like a really complicated topic to a lot of my patrons. Some of the patrons will seem overwhelmed, while some of them seem like they've heard it all before. So you do get quite a mix here with people and their knowledge coming into the class. Some people will jump in with questions as you're presenting, kind of, well, what about this? And I try to roll with that and answer the question while still keeping the whole class on track. And I get a lot of questions at the end. It's probably half an hour worth of people coming up to me after, sort of with their specific questions about their specific setup. Some people have offered to pay me to come to their house and help them set up, which I politely decline. So it is just a great opportunity for some really good patron interactions, which is what we want. I do also get patrons that call me later and tell me, oh, I did this and I'm saving this much money. So it's directly impacting our patrons, which is great. So basically now I want to open up to you with any questions that you might have for me, whether if you're looking to cut the cord yourself or if you're looking to develop a class and teach this to your patrons.
All right, so as Leah said, we have plenty of time now for some questions that you have. We have answered a few already, but keep them coming in the question box and we will get to them. Okay, the first one I have, we didn't get to this the last time we took a break. Do you have to have Apple products to get Apple TV?
No, you don't. So you can get that app on pretty much anywhere you can get the other apps now. However, they are doing a special right now where if you go out and buy an Apple product, you can get a year free of their Apple TV. So that's a perk to having an Apple product. But no, you can watch it on anything pretty much.
Awesome. And how long is your class that you do?
It usually runs about an hour. So I did trim it a bit for this presentation. And going to those links and kind of showing them the websites usually will fill up the rest of the time.
Great. And then do you ever do programs at other libraries or pretty much just for your library, Leah?
So I have presented this at a couple of conferences, so Tech Days and WAPL last year, I believe. I haven't taken it out to other libraries, though, yet.
Is that something you would possibly consider in the future? Not that I want to put you on the spot.
No, no, I would, you know, of course, have to have that cleared with my supervisors, but yeah, I would consider that, yeah.
Awesome. So do you have any options or ideas for those that do want to hire someone to come in and set this up in case people are like you, where they get questions or offers for services, you know, yeah, from other patrons?
Sure. It is a hard situation when the patrons tell me they just don't have anyone to come in and do it and they don't think they can figure it out. You know, it's a great side business out there if anyone wants to take that on. I usually recommend the Geek Squad through Best Buy. I think they're probably the most legitimate and trustworthy ones to start with. I think this is something that they would be willing to come in and do.
Great, thank you. A comment that came in the Amazon Prime video app, I have experienced that video content is very easy to buy even with parental controls in place. The video content, unless I am doing it wrong, is open to purchase as soon as you log into Prime Video to watch it. Any comments about that?
Yeah, I've noticed that as well, which is why I try to make the point to look for that Prime symbol, because once you link in your credit card or you're linked into your Amazon account, it already has your credit card, and then in their catalog, they don't really make a great job of separating what's Prime and what you can pay for. However, once you click on something, it will usually say something like watch with Prime or this costs $3.99. So you just have to kind of keep an eye out on that.
Great. So I think a lot of times when we talk about technology, I know a lot of times, especially libraries that are smaller, have a hard time keeping up and have a hard time, maintaining some of this. So what is the best way, do you think, especially if you are working at a small library, to just stay on top of all this stuff? Because I don't think it's realistic for a patron to come in and for you to know everything off the top of your head. So do you have any quick tips about just what, if you're in a library with a staff of 4 or 5 people and you get these questions come in, any advice or tips for that?
Yeah, I would say, first of all, I'm sure we all know this, but Google is definitely your friend. So many of these questions that I had when I was doing this, or questions that I get in the class that I maybe don't know the answer to, I'll just quick Google it, and I usually find the answer pretty quick on some sort of tech website. I do really recommend for this specific topic to go ahead and subscribe to that newsletter that I recommended. It's very brief. He offers links for things for more information if you want. But it's a really good summary of what's going on in that world. Otherwise, I do also subscribe to just the general techhive.com's newsletter, which they send out, I think, a couple times a week. And that will kind of talk about any big new devices that are coming out, or if, Apple's putting out a new iPhone, kind of things like that. So I just stay in touch with sort of the tech world in case, I get those questions at the desk or something.
And if you get a question at the desk, are you comfortable with saying, I don't know that off the top of my head? Can you give me a few minutes to look that up, or can you browse a stack, or do you have something else you need to do here while I find that?
Oh, definitely. Yes.
Yeah.
For sure. And I even, like I said, I even have to do this sometimes in my class, or if they come up to me after with a question that maybe they're asking about a service I've never even heard of. And I'll say, oh, can you, write down your name and number, and I'll look into that and let you know later.
Yes. It's not necessarily knowing everything right on the spot. It's a matter of trying to find the information. Anne asks, if you have a newer smart TV, do you recommend still purchasing a Roku?
No. I would definitely try out the smart TV and see if it's going to work well for you first. So the Roku's, the streaming stick isn't too expensive at $30, but why spend $30 if you don't have to? I would definitely, go into those TV menus and look for whatever service you're looking for, and then log into your account and see if you can keep a good internet connection while you're watching a movie or something. And if you're not having any issues, then that's great. You just saved some money. So.
A comment came in from Joe, and he says, if you add a password requirement in Prime, you can prevent unwanted purchases.
Okay, yeah, that would be a good option then if you're worried about accidentally clicking on something and buying it.
Yeah.
If you want to enter your password every time.
Another question, what handouts do you like to provide at these classes?
So I do actually print my slides with the notes. Like I print the notes version of the slides so they can write in their notes on the side. It takes a little bit in copying costs for us, but I think it's really helpful to be able to take these notes with you. So that's pretty much the only handout I do provide.
Great. I'm not seeing any other questions come in. Just any other last minute tips if someone out there is interested in providing a class like this for their patrons, or anything you'd like to provide?
Yeah, I would say don't be too afraid of it. You will probably, just going through this class, you'll probably know more than they do. So any help that you can give them, they'll be very grateful for. I know I was nervous teaching it the first time, just because I thought I didn't know what kind of questions I would get and what kind of services people are using, and they might have things I've never heard of. And that might happen, but that's okay. You're still they're there to learn, and they're trusting that you'll have something of interest, and I'm sure you will. So Just don't be nervous about it.
Great. Someone asked about, and I'm not going to make you answer this right now, about I'm using your slides right now to use, and I'm going to ask this person actually to follow up with you
Sure.
on that individually. Okay.
Sure.
All right. So it looks like we are out of questions, and so we will end a little early, which I don't think people mind. So thank you so much, Leah, for your great session and all of this information.
Yeah,
so as
thank
I
you,
mentioned,
everybody.
this session recording and slides will be posted on our conference website later in the week. And our next session in this track is with Laura Solomon, and that begins at 1 o'clock, and she'll be talking about website accessibility. So if you haven't registered for that and you want to, you still can. You can go to our website and do that. So we hope to see you there. And if not, we hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you very much.